Hello, everyone. I'm Christian Burris, and I'd like to welcome each and every one of you to the beginning of our 2014 ZSR Library Lecture Series. I serve as co-chair of the lecture series along with Carolyn McCallum, who will be up shortly. And just as a shameless plug, on the table in front of us, you'll see these nice bookmarks which advertise our entire lecture series schedule for the 2014 for the spring semester 2014. So on your way out, please feel free to pick one up and share with those who are unable to be present. It is my pleasure today to introduce our speaker for our first event for the 2014 season, Ms. Nancy Aguillon. Nancy is a 2013 graduate of Wake Forest University with a sociology major and an American Ethnic Studies / Latin American and Latino Studies minor. As a student, she served as a blogger, a student assistant for the Office of Diversity and Inclusion, a student coordinator for the Protégés Mentoring Program, and the president of OLAS, the Organization of Latin American Students. Nancy is also the 2013 Martin Luther King Jr. Building the Dream Award that's awarded annually between Wake Forest and Winston-Salem State Universities. As the student winner for the award, the Building the Dream Committee made these remarks. Her selfless and caring nature makes her worthy of the Building the Dream Award because Nancy works daily to advance tolerance and understanding of diversity in enduring ways. She is now a Scholars Counselor in the Wake Forest Scholars Office, working with first-generation students, and she plans to pursue a career in either public policy or higher education. So, ladies and gentlemen, Ms. Nancy Aguillon.
Hello, I want to start by thanking all of you. I know this is a difficult time to take out of your day, so thank you for dedicating this hour to come listen to me. So I wanted to start by asking if anyone went to Mr. Benjamin Todd Jellis's lecture on Monday. Cool. So some of what I will begin with will sound familiar. So the theme this year is On Common Ground, Fueling the Flame for Equality, which really resonates with what I wanted to talk to you about today. He started off by saying that MLK would be sad to see something that has come about our time is to see that we have managed to get some out of slavery only to enslave others. He talked about the civil rights movement being as neighbors living together as strangers, which I think is something that hasn't changed, but the strangers are different now. With that mentality, he also said, in that time we thought, if we don't help the stranger, what will happen to them? Or if we don't help the stranger, what will happen to me? Instead, we should look progressively and think, if we don't help the stranger, what will happen to us? Because, as he said this analogy, it doesn't matter what boat we came on, we're all in the same plane now. So I wanted to start. I do hope to be a professor one day, and I've actually never spoken more than 10 minutes at a time, so I have a little quiz. Not really a quiz, it's an information sheet, but I'm hoping that you will share your answers with me. So I'll pass these over. I guess instead of letting you all go through it all at once, we can go through it together as a group one by one. So does anyone have an idea of the answer to this question? Most immigrants come to the United States from, think of continents. So, anyone? Asia? Mm-hmm. Anyone else? According to the survey that I saw, it was a combination of Asia and Latin America. Many people think that it's primarily from Latin America just because of the proximity, but through all of the economy and everything, we actually have a lot more Asian immigrants than we assume. The second question, what percentage of the world's immigrants come to the United States? Wild guess, anyone? It's actually less than 1%. Because a lot of countries have open borders, immigration is easier in other countries. We view it as a problem or something very present in the U.S. because we have closed borders and single out immigrants as being different. But yeah. The third question. What is the most common reason people from other countries come to the U.S. to live? Jobs? It's actually to reunite with family. So just we all think, it's because of jobs, but there's some, for example, the male leaves the house to come work in the U.S. and then the woman may have a job in Mexico or another Latin American country, or even in another country, but because the father is making more money in the U.S., the father decides to bring the family. So, or the same with siblings. The older sibling decides to bring younger siblings. Fourth question: how many people immigrate to the United States? According to the survey, it's 1.4, and actually, and this leads me into this, never mind. 25% of the 1.4 come here illegally, so without authorization. So 75% of these 1.4 million immigrants come here legally. Sorry? Come legally. Come with a visa or a work permit or... we're on the fifth question. Immigrants made up what percentage of the total U.S. population in the year 2000? It's actually only 11%. And again, this is a combination of immigrants coming here lawfully or unlawfully. Next question. How many people of Hispanic/Latino descent are in the United States? A little less, 53 million. Yes. And of these 53, 11 million are undocumented. How many of these individuals have a legal presence? So if you subtract 11 from that, 42 million. Do immigrants cause a burden to the U.S. economy? If so, does anyone have an amount of how much immigrants cost the economy? There's actually no burden. They cause little to no burden. They actually support the economy or improve the economy. I believe it was in the year 2011. They paid $11 billion in taxes and only reaped $5 billion in public benefits. The reason why they don't seek more is because they fear that if they seek more benefits, they will be deported. So, and some ways that these taxes are collected is that sometimes these immigrants will use false Social Security numbers, meaning their employers will still take Social Security taxes out, but the individual won't be able to benefit from that amount that's taken out of their regular pay. And also, the immigrant population is seen as having very large purchase power, so purchasing goods, creating jobs. What percentage of Latino immigrants believe they should learn English? This percentage is 57%. So over half. So it's a little more than some estimate because they see that, some Latinos, because they live in in close proximity to one another choose to speak Spanish in their communities, but there's actually more that think it should be a requirement for you to know English. What percentage of jobs do immigrants take from native-born Americans? 0%. They have no effect or actually, like I said, increase jobs because of their purchasing power. And, you know, the more people we have in the economy, the more it's moving and the more it grows. So, yes. All right. I want to follow with my history with the civil rights. And this is a picture of my grandpa, Wilfrido Aguillon Montoya. He was born in 1938. My family is originally from Querétaro, Mexico. At the age of third grader, he left school to go work, and he worked in agriculture, mostly corn, he said. And then he was the oldest of 12. So as the oldest, you're expected to be the one that helps mom and dad out with all of the costs and bills and everything. So at third grade, he left his parents to go work in the fields in Mexico. It wasn't until 1960, right in the middle of the civil rights, that he came to the U.S. And his first job in the U.S. was picking cotton in Texas. I tried to. He's actually home in Hendersonville with my parents right now, so I was able to talk to him and was trying to ask him if, because he came here right at the age of 22 in the 60s. Like, I thought maybe he would remember a little bit about the civil rights movement. But then I realized my grandpa didn't know English, so he didn't know what was on the news or what was being said on the street. So he just remembers Martin Luther King he called him a politician, trying to help the slaves. This is the translation that he was getting from what he saw around him at that time, when slavery had actually ended long before that. My grandpa came through the Braceros program, which was the Bracero program developed out of a need for manual labor after World War II, or during World War II. And there were, by the time he was here on that program in 1960, there were about 300,000 Bracero manual labor workers that he was a part of. That program actually ended in 1964 because of a political figure I'll mention later, that since these individuals were coming on contracts, they part of the contract was to work. So it didn't matter what working conditions you were in, you were expected to work because you signed a contract, you're going to work. So even if you had to work all day in whatever weather with whatever pay the employer decided to give you, you couldn't complain. And so, yeah. And then in 1983, he decided to stay in the U.S. For good, because he got his papeles, his papers, through it was leading up to the Immigration Reform and Control Act of 1986. This was through the Reagan administration. This act was a pathway to citizenship for many agricultural workers. I'll read some of the acts or the statements for this act. It required employers to attest their employees' immigration status, made it illegal to knowingly hire or recruit unauthorized immigrants, legalized certain seasonal agricultural illegal immigrants. That's the category that my grandpa fell under, and legalized immigrants who entered the United States before 1982 and had resided continuously in the country. So through this act, about 3 million undocumented immigrants were granted legal status, including my dad. It's a picture of my dad and my mom. And this is a picture of the house my mom grew up in. So my mom has 8 siblings. So there's 9 of them all together, and they all lived in this little one-room house. My mom, as the oldest, the second oldest female. The oldest had a traumatic experience, so my mom was basically considered the oldest female. Left home really early to go work for other relatives. She was able to stay in school, but under the authority of relatives that kind of had her as I would say maybe like a maid. She said she would have to cook for her extended family and do all the housework and all of that. My dad, on the other hand, he was the oldest male in his family, so like my grandpa, at the age of a 4th grader, my dad left school and started to work. He moved to Mexico City and worked in construction there for several years. He's the oldest of 7. Yeah, it's a lot of family. And then around the time my grandpa decided to stay in the U.S. for good in 1983, my dad decided to come for the first time. And he worked in construction in Houston. So back then, my grandpa and my dad would move between Mexico and the U.S. frequently because they wanted to go visit my grandma and their siblings and children and all of that, which is much more different than it is now, where if a person immigrates here, it takes years, or even some don't even ever go back to Mexico because of all of the security or just the risks of crossing a border now. So that really changes the view of immigration and how the Immigration Reform and Control Act of 1986 worked a whole lot better than if we tried to do anything today. So between 1983 and 1987, my dad made it to North Carolina and decided he really liked it here. This is our house that he bought in North Carolina, and that's the house that we still live in over in Hendersonville, North Carolina. We moved into that house. This picture is of my mom and my oldest sister. My oldest sister was brought over here at 9 months, and my mom has a belly, and that's me. So they were fixing the house right before their first American daughter was going to be born. I was the first on both sides of my family to be born in this country, so it was a pretty big deal for our entire family. And like I said, we still own and live in that house. So we moved in there about 2 weeks after I was born. I want to follow up with this picture. So the top picture is the town that my parents grew up in Mexico, and then the bottom picture is Hendersonville. And as you can tell, it's not very different. We have mountains and a pretty small town, like with one road on both. So you can tell my family is doesn't really like change. And I think that's one of the main reasons my dad decided to stay in Hendersonville. And they're both home. So let me go back. So when my dad was in the U.S. or in North Carolina, he lived as many immigrant men did at the time, single men did, together in a trailer, relying on one another for transportation, for food, for company. Meanwhile, my mom was in Mexico, pregnant with my oldest sister. And during that time of their separation, my dad would be driven by his roommates to a bridge where he would be picked up by an employer to go to work. And then vice versa. After work, the employer would drop him off at the bridge, and his housemates would pick him up to go home. But he mentioned there were several times when he would be left at the bridge. Someone would forget to pick him up or forget that, my dad was there, so he would, not knowing the language, was forced to just stay there and wait for someone he knew to come see him. So that means a lot to me and really motivated me throughout my whole life. And to be able to say that that's my mom the day she got her citizenship. So that was in the year 2000. So to know that my mom like had to quit school and my dad had to quit school, but still they were able to get their GED and become citizens and put me and my sisters through college really like motivates me to speak about people who have a similar story as them. And I don't know if you got this, but my dad got his legalization through the 1986 Immigration Reform and Control Act. And unfortunately now there's many families that can't take advantage of that act, so they can't take advantage of the fact that they can go out and get an education and become a citizen, so which I find very unfortunate. And so that's me with my parents on graduation. Both Binal and Hendersonville are very agriculture-oriented towns too. So my dad worked in agriculture in both. Something about Hendersonville, over 600 youth are part of migrant families, meaning their families move up to 10 times a year from farm to farm all across the country. And 300 of those 600 youth are in the Henderson County Public Schools. So I would go to school and make friends, and then the next semester, the next month, those friends would be gone. So that was a little like kind of my child innocent introduction to immigration and that movement. Just seeing my friends leave. And that's me as a baby. So, and my older sister. So this was during the Labor Day parade. So it's just a symbol of how at home or in the community, like the Latino presence, my Mexican ancestry was very present. But then in school, I went to school with all American or Caucasian white American students. And so when I got to college, like, of course, I came here, and mostly white Caucasian American students, I kind of wanted to break that barrier. This is where I want to talk about a little bit why I got the award. As a student, I saw, like, the lack of awareness that some of my peers had towards people like me I am Mexican, but not all of us are Mexican. I had a roommate that was Ecuadorian, another one that was Peruvian. And to go to a class and we're talking about Latin America, and the professor mentioned Argentina to talk about Argentinians, and the students are like, oh, well, they're all the same. It's like, no, we're actually not all the same. I was actually Skyping with my Ecuadorian friend the other day, and she mentioned some holiday festivities that I had never even known about, and I was like, and people think we're the same, like, ethnicity. Just to point a few of those out, this is data from the Hispanic Pew Research Center. This center does most of the research regarding Hispanics in the U.S. So the first table has information about Argentinians, the second table has information about Mexicans, and the third table has information about Salvadorians. And you can see, like, all of the disparate, none of the numbers match, basically. Mexicans, of course, have the largest population. Argentinians have the most, with a bachelor degree or more, and Salvadorians with the least. The home ownership varies, everything varies. So it's just a testament saying that to prove that it is unfair and incorrect to label all of these listed on your left-hand side, listing them all as the same. And to go back to immigration, here's a table. As I said, I want to be a professor one day, so I really like data. You'll see a lot of data. So there's a total, in 2012, a total immigrant population of 41.7. Only 11.6 entered unauthorized or are now unauthorized. And so I feel like the media does a lot or portrays a lot of this dark brown percentage rather than the whole percentage. And that's something that and actually these 6 states in gold are home to 60% of unauthorized immigrants as of 2012. So they're very, concentrated in certain pockets of our nation. And this is, okay, so Arizona, over here, put this bill in act, titled Supporting Our Law Enforcement and Safe Neighborhoods Act. Basically, this, in the last section, you can see that a police officer can arrest anyone because of how they look, if they assume that the person is in the country without authorization, and prosecute them that way. And then there, along with other parts to the. Also, Alabama down here put this bill in act, which the last one, the 4th bullet point really caught me, required that schools check immigration status of students. This part, thankfully, was kind of overruled by the Supreme Court because of a case several years ago, Plyler versus Doe, which guarantees education to all students under the age of 16 or 18, I think they changed it. But anyways, those are 2 states that have less than 40%, like probably a fraction of unauthorized immigrants in their state, yet they're pursuing these really strict immigration bills against these people. Meanwhile, California, Texas, and the bottom is New Jersey, and as you can see over here, they're all in gold, are passing bills to allow undocumented students to pursue an education with federal support or with in-state tuition. So it kind of is interesting to see how states with the most unauthorized immigrants are doing things to help the immigrants or the unauthorized immigrants in their state, whereas states with very or less than you would think amount of authorized immigrants are doing things to kind of shun them and push them away. I wanted to talk about DACA, which is a bill or that Obama passed in I want to say it was 2012, and basically through this bill, if you came to the country before the age of 16, right here, and you have continuously lived in the country since 2007 to today, if you are under the age of 31, if you entered without exception or your immigration status hasn't expired, if you are currently in school or have earned a GED, have not been convicted of a felony or a significant misdemeanor, and were present on June 15, 2012, you are able to apply for a kind of protection against deportation and the ability to gain a temporary work permit for 2 years, and depending on the state, the possibility of gaining a driver's license, so you can drive legally. However, only 11.7 of the people that were within the age range were eligible for this, and only few have actually taken advantage of it. So, like, the country's trying to make changes or trying to help unauthorized immigrants, but obviously they're not getting at the whole picture. So I wanted to follow with going back to the title, Parallel Dreams. In the top corner you see Cesar Chavez. He was a farm worker in California, and he helped found the United Farm Workers Union. He actually didn't like the Braceros program, the program that my grandpa was in, for that reason that it took advantage of immigrants and abused them. And so what he wanted was to, or what he did was create a movement around getting farm worker rights, like better working conditions, better pay, all of that. And but this Braceros program wasn't allowing them to do that because farm owners would just resort to the Braceros program to provide the manual labor that they needed, and ignore the already there farm workers that were trying to get more rights. His movement actually ended the program in 1964. Although he wasn't a fan of the Braceros program, he did want for these the people in the program, in the Braceros program, to gain rights. What he didn't like was that they were in this program. So he was one of the key players in getting the 1986 Reform Act that my family was able to benefit from. And the bottom picture is Cesar Chavez with Coretta Scott King. So I wanted to read a telegraph that Martin Luther King Jr. sent to Cesar Chavez. He says, "As brothers in the fight for equality, I extend the hand of fellowship and goodwill and wish continuing success to you and your members. You and your valiant fellow workers have demonstrated your commitment to righting grievous wrongs forced upon exploited people. We are together with you in spirit and in determination that our dreams for a better tomorrow will be realized." So while Martin Luther King was trying to fight for the African American civil rights, he was also extending a hand to farm workers in the Southwest with Cesar Chavez. And to this day, the Southern Leadership Conference is committed to getting unauthorized and immigrants better rights. And so there's several civil rights movements that are still happening today that have a lot in common with the civil rights movement that we all know about and look at in schools. Two of them are the gay, the LGBTQ rights movements and the women's rights movements. I have a few facts about women's rights to kind of get your blood boiling, because I got mine boiling. So women make up 50% of the population, yet only 20% of Congress. And there are 71 countries with female presidents. The U.S. is not one of them. And to this day, the woman makes 77 cents to every man's dollar. So as you can tell, these are movements that we should still try to support so that Mr. King's vision can be completed. So some of the similarities between the civil rights movement that we all know and these others is that they all sought equal education. They all had, youth was a big factor in these movements. Civil disobedience, marches and protests, and voter rights were all included. Students, just because of where they are in life, where there's no family, you have all this energy and passion, you just have so much power, time, and energy to create this change. The top picture is 9 dreamers, meaning they are in the country unlawfully, but they managed to graduate from high school and college. 3 of the 9 were deported, and so the rest followed in hopes to get the 3 that were deported to be able to come back. They were all able to come back through seeking asylum, so they consider this a victory of theirs. And then education just is really an important part of the immigration rights movement, because through the Plyler versus Doe, you know, all children are allowed to go to school, yet once they reach high school graduation, nothing's really guaranteed. A few days ago, I heard about a lawyer who passed the bar. So of course he had gone through all the schooling of a lawyer, yet he wasn't allowed to practice because no one was allowed to hire him because of his legal status. The Supreme Court, however, allowed him to open his own practice because nothing restricts him from being an entrepreneur. These are all like really significant wins, I would say, but he shouldn't have been denied access to joining a firm that already existed if he had managed to go through the intensity of law school and pass the bar. So these are just images of mass protests. You can see there's very many different people involved in both. Civil disobedience, voting rights. So basically, both of these, the immigrant population and the African American population, are seen as lower citizens or second-class citizens. So a big part is being able to give these people a vote in a place that they consider home. And so just a few fun things to end with. Well, not really fun, but so you would think that immigrants would want a pathway to citizenship, but there's actually more that just want a relief from deportation. So since you are in a country unlawfully, the government has the ability to take you out of the country and remove you from a life that has already been established here. And so through the Obama administration, through his first term, there have been 1.5 million deportations. And so that's something that the immigrant rights, or the immigration reform movement, really is trying to battle more the separation of families more so than a pathway to citizenship, because of course we're very family oriented. Yeah, so basically what I hoped that you have gained through this this presentation is that Martin Luther King's I guess vision unfortunately hasn't been fully reached, and that there are several myths that are keeping us, as you saw from the quiz, there are several myths that are keeping us from fully reaching that dream or that vision. And so I'd hope that you've learned something today to help in all of these movements and make his vision a reality. So thank you so much, and please ask away if you have any questions.